Welcome to Brookside's Morning Devotions. We're starting today a new series on the subject of excuses, and we're going to be looking at these on Tuesdays and Fridays. There's a well-known Northern Ireland preacher and singer who sang a wee song years ago, Excuses, Excuses. And in life we hear many excuses, but particularly in regards to becoming a Christian, there are many excuses people give as to why they don't become a Christian. Well, the one we're looking at today is the excuse people give is, sure, I don't need it. People say they're good enough as they are, they're good people, they live good lives, they don't do anyone any harm, and therefore surely they're good enough to go to heaven as they are. And we have to confess there's so many people around us who are not Christians, and they look good people and they live good lives and they don't do people a lot of harm. But when we measure ourselves up against other people, we come out all right. We don't seem so bad. But when we measure ourselves up against God, things are very different. And in the Bible, God says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You see, we're not measured against other people in this world. We're measured against this glorious God whose standard is perfection. One of the ways we can see that we're not good enough is by looking at the 10 Commandments. Let's think of some of them. You shall have no other gods before me. Literally, that commandment is saying you shall have no other gods in my face. We should have one God. He should be absolutely first in our lives. Do you do that? Do you always put God first? What about honouring the Lord's name? What about not taking his name in vain? Do you always honour God's name? What about keeping the Sabbath day holy as a day of worship to the Lord and not doing your own work or pleasures but devoted to the Lord? Do you keep the Sabbath day? What about murdering or adultery? Remember, Jesus said about these commandments, it's not just the physical action of murder or adultery, but it's when we do these things in our heart, when we hate people, when we lust in our hearts, we break those commandments. Or what about the commandment of false witness? Twisting things, exaggerating things, spinning things. Or what about coveting? Not content with what we have, but desiring what our neighbour has. When you measure yourself against God's standard, we all have to realise we all have sinned and fall short of his perfect standard. To put it another way, Jesus, in summarising the commandment, says you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. So, do you do that? Do you love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength? Are you totally devoted to the Lord? You see, when you ask people about the need to be saved, they say, I haven't done anyone any harm. Well, what have you done for God? Have you given everything to God which he requires and desires? And so, when it comes to salvation, you can't say, listen, I don't need it. The Bible teaches clearly, we have all sinned and fall short of the glory of God. There's a very religious man in the Bible called Nicodemus. He was a Pharisee. He was a part of a Jewish group that were really, really strict in seeking to obey God's law. He came to Jesus one night, and Jesus, in a sense, was quite abrupt. Before Nicodemus really could get into the conversation, Jesus says to him, you must be born again. He was saying to this man who outwardly in his religion, he seemed really, really good. Jesus says, you're not good enough. You need to be changed. You need to be born again. You need to be transformed in your heart. So let's face up to what God says. Don't sort these things out on your own thinking, because who decides in the end of the day is not you, but God. And God says we've all sinned and fall short of his perfect standard. God says we all need to be born again. We all need the salvation that Jesus has died to bring. So don't say there you don't need to be saved. Don't say there that you're good enough as you are, because then you're calling God a liar. Listen to this loving God who tells you you're not good enough to get to heaven as you are. You can't get to heaven with what you do. You need salvation. You need Jesus. You need to be born again. Realize your need of that. So, I can encourage you to share this so that others will hear this important truth as well. Amen.